Here's a question I want you to sit with for a second. When was the last time you felt genuinely well? Not just functional, not just keeping up, but actually well in your body, in the way you ate, in the way you moved, in the way you talked to yourself when no one was listening. I'm not asking about a number on a scale or whether you hit the gym this week. I mean the deeper thing, the thing underneath all the noise. If your answer came quickly and easily, that's wonderful, truly. But if you hesitated, if you had to think back further than you expected, then this show might be for you. My name is Samantha Schreiber, and I have spent most of my adult life in that hesitation. This is the through line. A little context for who you're listening to. I am 39 years old. I live in South Florida. I work in commercial real estate with my father, which is its own kind of gift I didn't see coming. I teach yoga and fitness, something I pursued out of passion and tenacity in equal measure. And I'm building this podcast because I believe something is deeply missing from the wellness conversation. And I think I know what it is. I am not a doctor. I am not a registered dietitian. I don't have initials after my name that will impress anyone in the health space. What I have is decades of confusion, a few hard-won turning points, and an obsessive curiosity about why women, smart, motivated, capable women, keep struggling with the same things. About their bodies, their habits, their energy, their relationship to food and movement, and themselves. I've lived most of those struggles, and that is my qualification. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I grew up in a health-conscious family. I don't remember a time when my parents did not prioritize nutrition or movement. They cared about what we all ate. They loved to move and exercise. They encouraged that love of movement in my brother and me. They deeply understood the laden pathway from feeling genuinely good in your skin to consistent movement to whole foods. This was a true gift. But even in households that care about health, things get complicated. I was always an active kid, drawn to wellness in some intuitive way. But I also developed some disordered eating patterns as I approached my teenage years. Restriction, then overcorrection, then the particular shame spiral that comes from knowing better and still not doing better. By the time I was 16 or 17, I turned to food to cope. I also used control over food to cope, sometimes in the span of the same day. I don't say this for shock value. I say it because I think it's incredibly common and incredibly underacknowledged. And because understanding that this started early, before I could name it or make sense of it, is important to the rest of the story. These attempts to control and restrict through food usually amplified during stress-laden times. Early experiences with heartbreak, romantic and otherwise, when I could sense that things in my home or in my life were heavy or stressful. How sensitive my system is to emotional turmoil. I did not know this back then. Looking back, I did not have language to express my feelings with words, so I took them out on my physical body and on food. The other thing that was true about me from a very young age, I was a high achiever. Type A, but add in a touch of relentlessness. I wanted to do things well. I wanted to be good at things. I wanted to earn my place in every room. And I wasn't afraid to work hard, but absolutely nothing came easy to me. It was around this time, maybe I was 18 years old, that I started disassociating from my body. What do I mean by that? I mean, I stopped living in my body and started hiding from it. Hunched shoulders like I could fold myself small enough that no one would notice I was there, including me. I didn't want to see myself in mirrors. I ducked out of photos. I ate to feel something and then felt worse for it, and that shame became its own kind of static, loud enough to drown out whatever I might have actually been feeling underneath. I was not in my body. I was hovering somewhere just above it, managing it barely, but always resenting it. This dangerous game of hide and seek I played with myself lasted about 20 years. At 23 years old, I went straight from college to law school in Toronto. I was probably a little too young or immature for a graduate program with that kind of weight to it, academically, emotionally, existentially. But I went, and I worked hard. There were no straight A's on my law school transcript. I was academically mediocre for the first time in my life. Health and wellness fell off the priority list almost immediately. I was stressed in the way that only law school can make you stressed, where everything feels consequential all the time, and your nervous system is basically on a continuous low hum of alarm. At that time in my life, I drank alcohol. I want to be honest about this, and this may be triggering. It was the kind of drinking that felt normal in that environment, in that era, which for context was around 2009 or 2010. Getting drunk, laughing it off, treating hangovers like badges of honor. But I now know that my relationship with alcohol was not healthy. I used it as a social lubricant, as confidence in a glass, as a way to turn the volume down on everything I was carrying but couldn't handle. Even though alcohol did not stand in the way of my professional goals, I see now that it was not something that was fueling my progress as a person or a graduate student or a friend or a daughter or a sister or a girlfriend. It was just a social norm I gladly partook in for all the wrong reasons. In 2013, I became a lawyer, a litigator, which means going to court and fighting for an actual living. Then I worked even harder for 8 years. I'm talking 12 to 16-hour work days plus weekends. I'm talking waking up at 3 a.m. in a panic that I forgot to do something or missed a deadline. I'm talking nervous system overload and cortisol surges. At one point in my career, I had an approaching 70-year-old partner tell me that he had never seen work ethic as intense as mine. The thing about being a lawyer that I certainly did not realize is that my professional life was measured in billable hours. Billable hours became a marker of my efficiency and a unit for my superiors to tally up and evaluate me by. When you're only as good as your billable hour and not all work you do is actually billable, you cannot get ahead of your time. There was no going home when the work was done because the work never ended, at least not for me. I could not shut my mind or my anxiety off. I had no boundaries. I didn't even know what a boundary was at that point in my life. I had something to prove to myself and to everyone else, and I would let nothing, not even that billable hour, stand in my way. Working out at that time in my life meant waking up at 4 a.m. to squeeze in a class before a full day. Eating well meant grabbing a salad at lunch and hoping for the best for the rest of the day, but planning nothing. Too much coffee, too much cortisol, a weight that was never where I wanted it to be, a sense of self that was tied entirely to output, to how much I produced or how much I achieved, and almost not at all to how I actually felt. And here's the thing nobody told me, and I certainly did not understand on my own. All of that stress had nowhere to go. I didn't have the tools to actually feel what I was feeling and metabolize it. Something hard would happen, and instead of acknowledging it, I would just compress it and keep moving until I couldn't. Until it came out sideways in the eating and the drinking, in the eczema that lived on my skin like a stress diary I couldn't close. I was built to feel things deeply. That's just true about me, and I know that now. And I spent about a decade treating that as a liability instead of as information. Underneath this building tension of dissociation and stress and overachieving lived a yearning to know myself, to like myself, to understand why I was the way I was and why I gravitated towards these tendencies that masked the turmoil I felt inside throughout my 20s. But there also lived a confusion or a lack of understanding about when and how that could come about for me. I sincerely thought that one day I would wake up just knowing myself without having to put in the work or actually understand who I was and what I brought to this world. I started therapy at 27. I was largely in therapy until I was 34. It gave me language. It gave me tools. It helped me understand my patterns, but even therapy couldn't compete with the sheer velocity of the life I was living. And then there were the personal losses. The relationships that didn't survive, a broken engagement, years spent trying to build a life in a city that never quite felt like mine. I guess from the outside looking in, my life did seem together, especially from a professional standpoint. I guess you could describe me as a high-functioning, social, busy girl. But deep down, I think I knew that I felt extremely lost. Not visibly, not dramatically, just chronically, quietly lost. No health habits could stick. Every time something fell apart at work, and something always fell apart, I would crumble, give up on whatever I'd been trying to do health-wise or in my personal life, start over, and then just crumble again. I couldn't get my head above water. And then 2020 happened. At the beginning of 2020, I lost a close friend from college. Her name was Erin. She passed away suddenly. She was young. There was absolutely no warning. I was devastated in a way that you're devastated when something happens that your brain simply cannot process. It felt senseless. It felt like a gigantic rupture in the fabric of how things were supposed to go. We were all just at the beginning of our lives. How could someone I love so deeply just not be here? In the grief, something cracked open in me. I remember going to the airport to fly home after her funeral, and in the Uber, I made myself a promise. The only way I could honor Erin was to actually live my life in a way similar to how she lived hers. My beautiful friend structured her life in reverence of all of the things and the people she loved. She didn't subscribe to shoulds. She loved her family, the one she was born into and the one she created for herself. She inhaled the vibrancy and beauty of her every day. I could no longer perform my life. I could no longer let what I believed my life should look like to dictate my decisions, especially when the societal expectation felt wrong in my heart. I had to learn how to live with intention, exist firmly rooted in my body and mind, appreciate the small moments, and find meaning that rang true to me. I had to do this in a way she would recognize as worthy of the chance I'd been given to live, to grow, to experience. As a result of this new line of thinking, I asked myself a question I'd never really let myself ask before. If it had been me instead of her, could I have said I lived a life I loved? The honest answer was a blatant no. I had prioritized my career so fiercely for so long without ever stopping to ask whether I actually wanted what I was working towards. I was chasing external markers, partner track, credentials, achievement, while veering further and further away from what I actually felt, what I actually wanted, and most importantly, what I actually needed. Losing Erin did not fix me by any means. Grief just doesn't work that way. But it cracked the door open, and I walked through it. In June of 2020, I flew home to where I'm from, South Florida. This was where I grew up, where my parents lived in my childhood home. I had permission from my law firm to work remotely for as long as I'd like. I was petrified to fly, but something in me knew that I needed to feel safe amidst the fear inherent in the pandemic and the deep tunnel of grief I was lost in after losing someone so close to me. I was an actual disaster. I was working more than ever. I was eating my feelings. I was traumatized in ways I couldn't fully name yet. Florida felt like the first place in a long time where I could exhale, where I could stop performing, stop producing, just be in it. It was raw. It was really hard, but something was thawing in me. My parents watched me work. They saw the hours, the pace, the cost of my career. And my father started a conversation about whether I might want to join him in the family business. Before 2020, I could not have heard that question. I was too locked into what I thought I was supposed to be. But losing Erin had rearranged my priorities in a way I could not undo. I started to listen to the voice I'd been turning the volume down on all of these years. That voice was my very own. What would I choose if I honored that voice and my deepest desires? What truly mattered to me? How could my life change if I prioritized the gifts that I actually valued? The beautiful thing about grief is that the loss is only so deeply painful because the love and the joy we experienced with the person or the relationship or the life we lost was so profound. I became fascinated with that duality. I also understood deep in my bones what it means when people say we are only on this earth for a short time. And if I could wrap my head around that concept viscerally, the next logical step was to understand what was important to me. Moving through the world in integrity, spending time with my loved ones and creating memories together, finding purpose in my career, and pouring into a cup that I had a vested interest in, seeing the world, finding the beauty in simplicity. I had believed that the harder I worked in every aspect of my life, the more meaningful my life would be. Squeeze my way onto the subway to get to the office, battle the cold, make sure I had everything I needed for the entire day, maximize my productivity, prove to everyone that I was strong and capable, work until 10 p.m., brave the elements to get home, then do it all over again the next day. Those were the things I had lived my life by up to that point. That belief system started to shift because profound loss forced me to actually look inside of myself, to stop hiding from my heart's desires. And what was there was that yearning for simplicity, for genuine care and support, for a softer life, for proximity to my family who wouldn't be around forever, for sunshine and space, for a change of pace, for actual possibility. So I made the change. I moved to Florida. I changed careers. And slowly, the life I actually wanted started to become visible, layer by layer. I began working at my family business with my father. I moved 10 minutes away from my parents. I had more free time. My life was a bit of a blank canvas that I had the privilege of beginning to paint on. Now, that was scary in and of itself. But taking these things step by step and living in the present moment and being open to possibility really helped me here. In 2022, I found a yoga studio that I loved. It's called Yoga Joint. And I realized something I'd always known, but never let myself take seriously. I wanted to teach. Yoga and fitness had always been the one space that felt fully mine, where nothing else followed me in. So I got certified that year and started teaching at Yoga Joint in 2023. Now, I just want to stop here because the pipeline from realizing I wanted to teach to actually becoming that teacher made me understand the concept of manifestation. It wasn't that I sat on a meditation pillow every morning with my eyes closed or shouted affirmations at myself in the mirror. It was that from the moment I decided I was going for this, I embodied the energy of the teacher I wanted to be. I couldn't explain it. Something just locked in. I knew this was going to be my future, and I didn't let doubt creep into the ultimate eventuality of that. I was bad at teaching yoga and fitness at first. Genuinely bad. Standing at the front of a room with a microphone, trying to hold space for a room full of people, this was humbling in a way that nothing had prepared me for. Bear in mind that I was trying something entirely new at 35 years old. I chipped away at it. I was determined. There's that hard work again. I got there. My goal was to become the kind of teacher whose class I would walk away from feeling so fulfilled, but also like I really earned that pride at the hard work I put into my body. That same year, I stopped drinking. Not dramatically, not with a rock bottom moment. It was really quiet. I just kept noticing that alcohol never gave me what I was reaching for. It made me feel worse physically. It cost me mornings I didn't want to lose. And one day I just had the thought, what if I just did not drink at all? Would I miss it? Spoiler alert, I didn't miss it. So alcohol is no longer a part of my life. And that's one of the best decisions I've ever made. Little by little, these decisions, moving to Florida, changing careers, learning a new skill out of passion and humility, shedding skins that limited me, started to bring me closer to myself. It was incredibly incremental and slow moving, but I was getting there. My personal life was still challenging. I was in a new place, meeting new people and finding my bearings. But through ups and downs, I kept moving forward. Teaching yoga and fitness brought on new challenges. I am someone that cannot help but give my all to what I prioritize. And so it was with fitness. I was in an infrared heated room for hours at a time, really cognitively guiding people through in a way that felt impactful. And whether I was demoing some moves on the mat or taking the whole class as the teacher, it was draining in a way I hadn't experienced up to that point. When I teach a class, I'm holding my students to a high standard and I am guiding them until the very last second. There were definitely times I overcommitted in that regard. But I kept asking myself, how could I find balance in my energy when I was giving my all to students? And what impact did that drain on my energy have on my life outside of teaching? How could I optimize my life outside of teaching to be the best teacher, but to also bring the most intention and integrity to what I chose to spend my personal time on? On top of that, I felt like an imposter. While I had more time to be intentional about movement and dedicate towards eating healthy, I was having trouble figuring out my own approach to nourishment and fitness. And while that was in flux, I felt like a fraud in front of a class filled with 50 people. I have learned that I move through the world in an optimal state only when my internal environment is aligned with my external choices and presence. So last year, I started working with a fitness and nutrition coach on something I'd been struggling with for years, the restrict binge cycle that had never fully gone away, and also optimizing how I dedicated my own time to this nutrition and my own fitness. My goal was to build muscle and lose fat in a way that felt sustainable and progressive and healthy. I also was frustrated that I knew a lot about wellness, but I still felt lost in my own body. I wanted to feel strong, and I wanted to actually understand how to fuel myself. That work has been transformative, not because my coach has handed me any sort of magic solution, but because it has forced me to confront how individualized health and wellness as a woman is. There is no universal answer. There is only what works for you in your body at this point in your life. And you can only find it if you're asking the right questions and diving deep to understand and trust yourself. Somewhere in the last few years, I've also discovered that I'm allergic to half of the skincare industry. I did patch testing through my dermatologist office, and I found and pinpointed the ingredients that were aggravating my skin. This was only after years of allergic reactions that I couldn't explain. I tell you that not as a tangent, but as a pattern. I keep discovering that my body knows things I wasn't taught to listen for, that the tools I needed were always available. I just hadn't been given the right map. Here is what I believe after everything I've been through. Women were never properly educated about their own bodies. Not in school, not by our doctors most of the time, not by the wellness industry, which is more interested in selling us something than in actually helping us understand ourselves. On top of that, the majority of medical research has been conducted exclusively on male subjects, meaning most of what we know about the human body was never actually studied in the bodies of women. That vacuum gets filled. It gets filled by whoever is the loudest, the most confident, the most algorithmically visible. It gets filled by trends and fear and shame and things that work for someone else, but maybe not for you. I lived in that confusion for most of my adult life. I was a high-functioning, highly educated woman who genuinely did not understand how to take care of herself. Not for lack of trying. I tried constantly. But I was working from incomplete and often contradictory information, and most importantly, I had no internal compass to sort through it. The through line, this very podcast, exists to change that. This show is about building that compass. It's about having the conversations that nobody had with us about our bodies, our hormones, our movement, our nutrition, our mental architecture, our intuition, our emotions, our energy, our spirit, our relationship to all of it. It's about talking to people who are doing extraordinary work in this space and making their knowledge accessible, not as gospel, but as material for you to metabolize. That word metabolize matters to me. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I am not an expert. I'm just simply a voracious seeker. And the point of this show is not to give you another voice to outsource your decisions to. It's to help you develop your own voice, your own discernment, your own through line. 5 pillars anchor everything we'll explore here: mind and body education, movement, inner architecture, nourishment, and designing a life. Those 5 things in my experience are not separate. They are one continuous thing. And we as women cannot optimize any of them in isolation because everything is connected. So, who is this show for? It's for the woman who has tried a lot of things and is tired of starting over, who is smart enough to know that the answer isn't another protocol, but also doesn't know what that answer is, who has a hunch that she's been missing something foundational and is ready to go looking for it. It's for the woman who wants to feel as good on the inside as she's trying to appear on the outside. It's for the woman who's done performing wellness and well-being and is actually ready to practice it. Because the reason I felt called to start this podcast is exceedingly simple. I kept having the same conversation over and over and over again with different women. Women trying to get pregnant, women trying to build muscle, women trying to understand themselves better, women seeking spiritual guidance, women looking for motivation to treat their bodies and minds kindly. These conversations frustrated me because shouldn't there be an accessible source we trust to educate ourselves about our own well-being? These conversations confused me because we learn calculus in high school, but not how to trust our own gut instincts. These conversations inspired me because I love diving deep with someone about their own wellness.
And so it became obvious to me. If I couldn't find what I and all of these women I was speaking to was looking for, why didn't I try and create it? My hope is simple. That something you hear, one conversation, one sentence, one idea, lands in a way that makes you want to do something differently. Not because this podcast told you to, because something in you recognized it as true for you in your own unique way. That's the thing I want for most women listening to this. Not just information, though there will be plenty of that, but the experience of hearing something and feeling it click, that quiet internal yes, that gut knowing that doesn't need to be argued into existence. Real change is scary. I know that better than most. Look at my journey to this moment in time where I am more well than I have ever been, but still have so much further to go. I also know that the fear doesn't go away before you move. It doesn't even go away because you moved. It pops in every now and again and lives alongside us as we seek and we rise and we ebb and we flow. I want the show to be the thing that makes you willing to take that first step. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving this your time, which I don't take lightly. Next episode, we begin. I'm Samantha Schreiber, and this is The Through Line.